So I recently got done reading this book, Notes from the Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And it was a really interesting read, and I look at it like this. I see that there are a lot of ways that we as people get caught up in our own thoughts and our memories and identification with things, often negative identification with things, a sort of a defensive stance that we take as individuals. As time goes on, we've had lived experiences and we try to protect ourselves against various things. We try to be smarter and do the thing that we think is going to serve us best, and sometimes we can get into a bit of a rut. So the topic of today's video is still stuck in the matrix. Are you still stuck in the matrix, and what does that look like? Sometimes when you're stuck in patterns, you can be stuck in the matrix, right? If you're overly identified with things that are maybe not serving you, if you are self-sabotaging, you're probably stuck in the matrix, because what the matrix, if you want to call it that, relies on essentially is just you to live out your predictable patterns, right? So, and I'll explain it a little further, right? So if you take advertising, for instance, predictable patterns are part of that. Government policy making, a lot of different types of planning rely on understanding people and their behavior, right? You understanding yourself and your own behavior can actually help you in magnitudes. It can help you in ways that you never would have thought it could help you. And I'll explain that as well. So imagine, right, you go throughout your day, right? Most of us don't usually write down all the things we do throughout the day, but I can bet you there are things that you do that are maybe not serving you, maybe they're not helping things, maybe they're not moving you forward. It could be anything from spending money on something that you shouldn't, to wasting time on something like social media. It can be something like being too caught up in petty things, right? Petty drama. These are the kinds of things that can actually cause you to waste away your life. And in a certain sense, if you're following those patterns and you're, kind of biting on whatever's being put in front of you, then you are stuck in the matrix. And I'm not even saying this as a jab or anything. Like, I think about these things all the time because I personally don't want to be stuck in the matrix, but I also realize that sometimes we can be so sure that what we're doing is the opposite of that we don't even realize we're playing right into the same kind of trap by trying so hard to be divergent, that we're being purposely oppositional to whatever we would or should do in order to just, do things out of spite, like Dostoevsky said. So in the beginning of the book, I recognized that he started talking a lot about doing things out of spite. And I found that particularly interesting because I myself have at times decided that just out of spite for the natural order of things, or the way that, what's expected versus what I want to do, or what I think is more true to a person's true expression of themselves, right? I started to look at ways that I could be divergent. And sometimes if you're not careful, you can get caught in the trap of doing the obvious divergent thing in any given situation, which could just be money management wise, because maybe you think money isn't as important, right? So then you make decisions that are not showing you value your financial resources, right? So that's one. Another one is, going the kind of unconventional route when it comes to careers and jobs and things like that, right? So sometimes you can actually shoot yourself in the foot because there's a lot of opportunities you could use however they work best for you. And you could also marry some of the things that are your sole passions and missions with those things. And it's one of the ways that businesses work, right, is that you have clients and you have people that you work with, and you have your skills and talents and abilities that you bring to the table that you can use to sell yourself and to make those connections with others that can help you grow your business, can help you grow your creative prospects, and nurture those relationships that can actually get you somewhere in life. So these are all important things, but sometimes people say, you know what, I don't really care what people think, right? At some point you're going to be faced with some need of survival. You'll be in between a rock and a hard place, and you'll have to choose which thing you're going to do based on ultimately, unconsciously, you're going to be thinking about your own survival. So therefore you care what people think. So that one is an interesting one. But I just always look at this kind of stuff, and just I examine it really closely. And after reading that book, there's a lot of stuff. Like, he kind of, the main character in the book, he rejected love in the end, spoiler alert. But he also was just so bitter and so closed off, and everything was his own beliefs in his mind that governed his own behavior. It created a self-fulfilling prophecy for him, and it really just shows you, like, it makes you examine your thoughts, because he did so much monologuing in the book to himself that when you get done reading this book, you actually listen to your own thoughts when you're going about your day, and anything negative, anything where you're seeing things in a particular way and you're kind of defensive against it, you start to reflect back on the book and why that's actually not a good pattern, even though you think you're serving yourself by being different and by being not taking part in what you scoff at or whatever. But the reality is, you've got to I want to use my signature phrase and make lemonade, right? You've got to take life's lemons, all this stuff that gets thrown at you, all these circumstances, things that don't go your way, right? People that maybe you thought would be there for you and they aren't, or people that don't get along with you well, right? Situations, maybe you go through the same stuff over and over, and you kind of, at a certain point, you're going to kind of develop a little bit of a negative stance towards things, right? But imagine that you still just have this, maybe the divergent thing is to embrace love and embrace connection. I'll leave you with that. Like and subscribe, and we'll talk more about this.